On this week's edition of District Directions, Ms. Connie Blaney will be updating us on district updates. Dr. Judy Barber will focus on our educational system on Focused on Learning. Mr. Rex Suba will inform us on the recent PIN activities with his PIN points, so stay tuned.
Welcome back to another edition of District Directions. I'm Amanda Patterson.
And I'm Lawrence Bothwell. Whether it's voting on raising bonds, funding projects, or deciding the district dress code for the students, the Board of Education does it all. And here to tell us about the recent decisions of that board is Ms. Connie Blaney and her district update.
Good evening. A special board meeting was held on Valentine's Day. The meeting opened with Dr. Dan Snell, new school board member, being sworn into office. The board also recognized Tom Clote Jr., outgoing president, for his 5 years of dedicated service to the district. We appreciate Mr. Clote's service to the board. We wish him good luck. The board elected new officers for the 1997 year. They are Mike Baumgartner, president, and Linda Sexton, vice president. Our other board members are Don Stone, Gary W. Copeland, and Dan Snell. The clerk of the board is Betty Toon, and deputy clerk is Lois Ainsley. Treasurer is Wayne Warner. On Wednesday of this week, February 19th, the board hosted a study session at 6 p.m. in the Administrative Services Center to review the Citizens Advisory Council Student Transfer Report. The purpose of the study session was to allow the board members to exchange information, discuss the advantages and disadvantages to each option in the CAC's report, and to clarify these options with CAC members and with administrators. The public was invited, and several patrons did address the board about advantages to certain options and their own personal feelings about these issues. No decision was made at the February 19th meeting. The final transfer policy decision will be made at the regular February school board meeting on Monday, February 24th at 7 p.m. in the Administrative Services Center. Public communications is held at the beginning of each regular school board meeting. In next week's update, I will give you a full report of what happened at the February 24th meeting. Teachers are reminded that grant applications for classroom grants funded by the Norman Public School Foundation are due the Monday after spring break, March 17th at 4 p.m. in Assistant Superintendent Dr. Nancy O'Brien's office in the Administrative Services Center. Certified staff can also apply for staff development grants, which can assist someone who is planning to attend a professional development workshop or attend courses at the college. These staff development applications are also due on March 17th. The Norman Public School Foundation is gearing up now for its annual fund drive planned in late March. A kickoff breakfast for major donors was sponsored by Legends Restaurant on February 25th. We thank Legends for its support and thank the Foundation Board Trustees for their dedicated volunteer services to our district. Congratulations to 3 educators honored on Wednesday, February 26th at the Oklahoma School of Science and Mathematics in Oklahoma City. A Teacher Appreciation Day ceremony was held at the school in honor of educators who have offered exceptional guidance and encouragement to students in Norman and to other places around the state. Educators honored in Norman are Ann Crocker, West Mid High teacher, Charlotte Jones, Madison Elementary principal, and Will Allen, West Mid High teacher, and last year's District Teacher of the Year. Norman Public Schools' 1997 finalists have been named in the Teacher of the Year program. We congratulate the following finalists: Jetta Burden from West, Tracy Fuhr from Norman High School, Michelle Gentry from Madison, Tim Hutchison from Washington, Sandra Knudsen from Adams Elementary, Susan Powell from Roosevelt, and David Wilson from Jackson. One of these finalists will be named District Teacher of the Year at the Celebration of Teaching Banquet on Friday, April 18th. For Norman Public Schools, I'm Connie Blaney.
Thank you, Mrs. Blaney. Now, some decisions that affects the district, the community, and you are too important for just one person on the Board of Education to make. In their place, parents, community leaders, and teachers form a committee to collaboratively vote on these important decisions. Dr. Judy Barber focuses this week on these collaborative efforts of the community on her Focus on Learning.
Welcome to Focus on Learning. Collaborative decision-making is a big part of the Norman Public Schools organization. Recently, the Staff Development Committee has gone on a retreat in order to get ready for the revising of the four-year plan that goes into the state. And I thought that I would invite some guests today to talk about that retreat and the kinds of things that happen. So we have Tina Nations, who's the principal at West Mid High and to be the principal of Norman High School next year. Larry Willoughby, who's a parent and resident. I think I'm going to call you Larry, and I'll come back to that in a minute. And Nancy Kopowitz, who teaches at Washington Elementary School. Thank you all for joining me. I wanted to talk a little bit about the retreat and the content of it and the things that you did and why you thought it was important. Let's just start with the idea of a retreat, though, because you went away for, Tina, you were there 3 days? Mm-hmm. 2.5, 3?
2.5.
2.5 days to Seminole, past Seminole. Was it worth taking the time away from your daily lives?
I think it was. One important thing about a retreat is that is a place that you choose, and we went to St. Crispin's, and there there's not really an available telephone. I mean, you can call if you need to, but having a telephone, not having interruptions, and also at a retreat you work in the evening. We started on a Tuesday evening and came back on a Thursday afternoon.
Right. So you really have more than a 6-hour, 8-hour day. Right. Larry, you left your family and your work, and what did you think?
That's right. I've actually enjoyed it. This has been the second year I've been able to go, and it constantly amazes me how much work we can get done in that 2-day period of time. We'll start at 7 or 8 in the morning and quit about midnight, and it's just a tremendous amount of work accomplished in the 2 days.
Efficient use of time.
Absolutely,
Right.
absolutely.
And Nancy, you left those little children. What grade is it?
First grade.
Uh-huh.
I also think the variety of work that we do. We do a lot of different things, and it's well worth your time to do it.
Good.
It's my second year also, and really learned a lot from going to these retreats.
I think it's an efficient use of time, too. Each time that I'm on a retreat, I'm amazed at how much we do get done.
I think it helps us refocus, too, on what we're about.
Good point. That is. And the no telephone is an important part of it. Well, I wanted to look at the content that you dealt with, the overall areas were the school improvement plan, the professional development plan, the capital improvement plan, and the alternative education plan. And for our audience, just to let you know that throughout the last several years, the state has asked for documentation of what we're doing in the district, and they have some mandates on what we do, but there's also a lot of local control into what goes into each of these areas. And on the show today, we sure don't have time to discuss all of it, but I'd like to take some of it. One thing that, on the day that I was there, that happened was a video that had to do with some little characters and the idea of change. Obviously, this year in Norman Public Schools, there's a lot of change going on. How about from each one of you? What did you think of that video?
It was a fun video. It was done in a cartoon way, and it solidified my thoughts about how people deal with change, because they showed some characters who took it by the tail and dealt with it, and then the other characters kind of were the victims of change, and also the process of change. It talked about how people go through the steps of change and accepting it.
What did that do to you, Tina?
Well, it just, I I've seen those people all year, both kinds. And I do think both attitudes are really probably valuable, because the ones who don't want to change question some things that maybe we do need to revisit and to look at. And so they both have value. And I think that just last night even we were having department meetings for our new schools, and several people there were people who had been struggling with the change in assignments and said it's time to move on. And it was like the video. They said, okay, they came over to the other side and said, you know, it's time to move on.
Right, the importance of both roles, so that the people who will accept change readily don't just go rushing off into things. The questioning is important. Larry, you've had a chance to look at our district from a variety of roles as a parent. I know we don't have a half hour on this show, but would you run through some of the ways that you do volunteer in our district?
Certainly. I was the chairman this year of the Citizens Advisory Council. On the Central Gifted Site Plan Committee. I'm on the District Gifted Council, and I'm on the Staff Development Committee. That's the four at this point.
I know that I run into you a lot, which I appreciate. Especially with the Citizens Advisory Council this year, you've had a chance to look at our district in dealing with change, both in the public arena and within our schools. Give us your viewpoint.
I kind of think in the video, I thought more about the length of time I have involved as a parent. It seems to me when we first started out, the parents were kind of the one section of the video, and the schools and the administration were the other side. Over the 8 or 9 years that I've been involved, it seems like we have now come together and are working as one. So I looked at it from the standpoint of 9 or 10 years involvement as a parent.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear you say that. I hadn't thought about that when I was watching it, but I do feel that way. Is that the collaborative nature of parents within our district is so much stronger in giving us so much. I appreciate that. And you bring up the point of 5 or 6 years. And the change model that we use in our district, as you all know, but to let our audience know, is one that's called CBAM, which is Concerns-Based Adoption Model. And it talks about that in any change, if it's a big change, it takes 10 years to come about, with the major part in the middle, which is the management, of about 4 or 5 years. And one of the things that you worked with at the retreat was the looking at the role of decision-making from advisory boards in curriculum development and curriculum monitoring. Let me hear just a little bit about what you thought about that particular section.
Well, I think it was really good to revisit that, because as we did, that role, that part was really written 4 years ago. This is a 4-year plan, and that was written about 4 years ago. And we have evolved in some different ways that we process some of that information. And I think Curriculum Review Council has come into more of a role, and so we were able to revisit that and update it to what really is happening.
Larry, before we started the show, you brought up the fact that at a time you thought we were speaking a foreign language.
That's right. That's exactly
Talk a little bit about
After
that for parents, because I think that is important.
After 2 years, I'm still not sure you're not speaking a foreign language. From a parent standpoint, it's a very difficult committee, because you discuss areas, state and federal mandated, that I think the average parent has no idea is even in place. So it seemed like the first year for me, I was just totally in the dark. This year, I seem to understand a little bit more. At the retreat, I appreciate the people taking the time to explain to me what we were discussing and that kind of thing. So I feel like at this point I have a little better understanding of that.
Well, I think it also brings up a fact that we need to keep in mind as we're working with parents in our committees, is that previous to the work, there needs to be some briefing to bring people up to speed on what's going on.
That would be a really good idea.
And even then, because it's a whole nother organization, it takes a while to assimilate into it. And I know in our Gifted Council, that's one of the things that's come up, is that the parents need to be patient with themselves, because you need some time to learn.
That's right.
I think another point on that, like Larry said, we hear about the state mandates and federal mandates and that sort of thing, but what I appreciate about the leadership of the district is that when those things come up, and sometimes we even get surprised because they're different wording than what we thought,
Correct.
is that we take an opportunity to reflect on what we're doing already, and how just don't get scared of this and just turn turn everything upside down. Let's look at what we're doing that fits what this is saying. And typically we are doing a lot of it already. We always need to grow and do different things, but at least we don't say, oh my gosh, this is all new, let's turn everything upside down. So I think that I appreciate the leadership in the district to say, let's look at it and then see what we're currently doing that would meet these mandates.
Nancy, you started to say
Oh, I was going to say, at the retreat, we divided into 3 groups, and they were vertical teams. And so each team had administrators from schools and, from the district, and teachers and elementary and secondary teachers. And so we all brought a different point of view of how we looked at advisory councils and teachers and principals' roles in curriculum development. And so it was a well-balanced view of
It really
the
makes a
roles.
difference, doesn't
Yes,
it? Because
yes.
people do have differing viewpoints from where they entered it. And one of the things that I think all humans do and is that you take your situation, generalize it out, and you assume that that's the way it always is. And it isn't at all. It isn't at all. And so to have that collective thought.
It was also an interesting process to revise by committee. That was an interesting thing to do. You can kind of get caught up in 2 or 3 words,
Right.
and you have to back off and say, okay, it's fine, and go on.
Yeah, that's another thing that I appreciate about it, because I look at things at the whole, and I'm certainly not a detail person. And I really appreciate the people who are, because then you get the polish as well as the meaning. As we looked at advisory boards and that decision-making process, I might say for the audience is that each of our areas, social studies, science, fine arts, have a group of teachers who represent schools across our district, and they come together with curriculum directors and discuss the kinds of things that should be happening in each of the disciplines, and then make recommendations to a curriculum review council and to principals. And the thing that I was struck with is that we are at the place in our district, just like I see America, is that democracy, which this is, takes a lot of time. It's messy. It's not clear-cut. And as the people's ideas push on other people's ideas, it goes back out to schools for more conversation. And then when the final product comes, it is a compromise. And as I look at it, always a fine one, but a compromise. And so then you have to deal with the reactions to the compromise. So it's definitely democracy, I think, in place, for sure. You also read at the retreat teacher portfolios for Teacher of the Year. And I missed that this year. So tell me a little bit about that and how you felt about it.
To me, that's the most fun being on the staff development committee, is being part of the Teacher of the Year process. And I'm always so impressed with the finalists and with the, each site representative. We have some wonderful teachers, and it reaffirms my role as a teacher and what a wonderful district we have, and some really powerful teachers. And we're not given any criteria on how to give them points or anything, and we're not allowed to discuss it with each other, and that's always difficult, because you always want to go to, I want to go to Larry and say, can you believe how wonderful this is, and so we just kind of develop our own criteria for grading them, and it's always a real powerful experience for me.
So you each read each one alone, and then have your own thouts about it first. Larry, what do you think when you read it?
Between us.
I think as a parent, it's probably the most wonderful opportunity I've ever had in the time I've been associated with schools. It just amazes me, the quality and the of these teachers and the caring attitude and all that kind of thing. It's from the standpoint of trying to pick the finalists, that's probably the most difficult thing we've ever done. That's harder than anything we ever did on the CAC.
Right.
It also inspires me as a teacher to go and be a better teacher, because they're so wonderful. I should live up to their quality.
Go ahead.
I wish that more parents had the opportunity to read these portfolios and to see these interviews and that kind of thing, because they're just phenomenal.
They are.
They really are.
A point that's always made with our Teacher of the Year selection is that this is not the best teacher in Norman. This represents the best of the best, and that's a high quality because of the staff that we have.
That's right.
Well, let's see. What else you did? You reviewed the capital improvement plan, and you reviewed the alternative education plan, and then we talked about the remediation for the CRT program, and that's just been in place for 2 years, and so that was pretty much new information to people. And to review for our audience, the state mandates that tests be taken over the state mandated curriculum, and then students who do not hit the state cutoff score or fail from the state's point of view have an opportunity to take remediation. The districts are required to offer remediation, but parents, students are not required to attend. And as we presented to you at the retreat, the students who have taken that opportunity when they retook the test passed that test on a 2-to-1 ratio. Now, we don't have a lot of kids still taking remediation, and I assume that'll grow. But as we worked with that area, what were some thoughts that you had? The retreat, I think, was a mixture of you gaining information and giving input. When we got to that, how did that strike you?
Well, I think that a concern from the administrator's point of view is and we couldn't really, we talked about some ways to deal with that, was how to also get students to take it seriously.
Yes, the testing itself.
The testing itself seriously. We do, as we look at things and say what would require, like we did when we were reviewing our world history for next year, is that we do see the past document as having skills that students need to learn.
Right.
And we all agree with those, and a lot of our teachers here worked on those state committees to help develop those priority academic student skills. And we agree that they should have that knowledge and know them, but we just sometimes at the high school level have a difficult time getting students to take the test seriously.
Right, because they may very well know them, but just skip through the test.
Yeah.
Right, or skip the day.
That's right.
Because they don't want to take the test, right.
Now, as an elementary school teacher, I didn't know a whole lot about this information, but we did talk about who was responsible, like, is it 8th graders take the test, and so it was the 9th grade teachers who would be giving the remediation,
Right.
and how to get that information to the teachers, and who would be responsible for teaching this remediation, and when.
We
It's a
also
good
talked
point,
about that
Nancy.
information getting back to the 8th grade teachers
Right,
that the 9th grade have to
exactly that.
remediate. We talked about how does the 8th grade teachers get the information to know what, because of the students with us and not with them anymore,
Exactly.
how do we get that information
So they
back to the
can use
8th
it
grade
for
teachers?
next
Right.
year.
When you have an organization of 1,000 teachers like we do, and all 1,000 need to know some about this in some way, and then the parents and the students too, the attacking the communication that needs to happen takes a lot of thought and planning.
And they talked about using overtime in high
Yes.
school for that, and I was really struck with the amount of time and dedication it would take from a regular classroom teacher to be doing this, because overtime is time that she or he can spend working with a lot of students,
Right.
and that would just be an added, and they seemed to think that would be a good time to use that for, but that it would just be extra work,
It
really.
takes a lot of, in our district, making plans and then monitoring and watching and then revising, and of course that was what this retreat was all about. Well, before we close, I'd like to hear what it meant to each of you in your roles. The retreat idea we've already talked about, but this particular retreat, what'd you get from it?
Well, I always get cold chills every time I go there and we start this, and there are, people from all over the district, and I actually have a voice in what's being said, and that I represent quite a few teachers, because there are, I don't know, 5 elementary and 5 secondary teachers on that staff development committee. But that we actually have a voice in the direction that the district takes, and that we are listened to as equals, and that's very meaningful to me.
And you can feel it, can't
And I
you?
can feel it,
Yes.
and I do know that I'm taken seriously, and that the things that I have to say go beyond that retreat, that they're taken back to other groups and other committees, and that it becomes part of district
Right.
policy.
You can
And
see it in the final
Yeah.
product when it occurs.
it's a real powerful feeling.
Larry, what did you think?
Well, I think again, as a parent, it's a fairly difficult committee. But each year you learn a little bit more about the inner workings. I know this year I was a lot more comfortable in some of the things we talked about. It's extremely interesting to see the ideas we put forward for the next 4-year plan coming out. I think the Teacher of the Year portfolios is always my favorite part of that. But I have enjoyed it both years. You know, I mean, it's an experience that a parent ought to have. I mean, to go and see what goes on that you have no idea about.
Yeah. One of the things that I always feel is that the working part is extremely important, but also the relationships and getting to know people across the district and with parents is a real important part of that retreat. And I think you get more of it in that setting than you do in a night meeting and so on. Tina, how about as an administrator?
Well, I think there are several things, but I think most of all, just there's a role that principals and assistant principals play in curriculum development, and it's a major responsibility. And sometimes we get so caught up in our day-to-day activities and our day-to-day problems, and we spend much department time and school time in the same role of decision-making, but we sometimes forget how important it is that we continue to monitor curriculum and work on a curriculum, and that always reminds me that we have an important role to play there, and we've got to make it a priority.
That's an excellent point, that as in a principal's role, you have a management time that you have to manage a large organization, and you have to be very careful that you don't let that crowd over into the leadership part that you must play. And as you made the point earlier, it does give you a time to get away from that phone and refocus and think about some other decisions that need to be considered. Well, I want to thank you all for your time on the show, and also the time that you were willing to take away from your other busy lives in order to attend the staff development retreat. And to our audience, I'd like to say, if you're not involved in your school side or at the district level, really give that some thought, because we would invite your viewpoint. It makes a big difference in the final decision. And thank you for joining us on Focus on Learning.
Thank you, Dr. Barber. Mr. Suba, the Penn president, from time to time joins us to inform us about the recent activities of the Penn organization. This week, however, he will be discussing more in detail about the upcoming election.
Well, that's all the time we have for this week for District Directions. For Lawrence Bothwell, I'm Amanda Patterson.